So this is a cooling system operational description we're going to do on this engine here. So let's go. So I'm going to point out a few components first. First one I have here is the upper rad hose, and let's just look around the corner here. The radiator, rad cap. Come around here. If you look all the way over here, this orange one here is the bypass hose. This is the thermostat housing. Underneath there is the thermostat. That's always, almost always at the end of the upper rad hose. And then if we go down here, that's the water pump right there. This is the fan belt. And we're just gonna go around this corner here, and you can see the fan, and inside you can see the radiator. We'll go around the front and have a look. You can see the radiator right there, and if we have a close look, I'm just gonna tilt this up a bit. I might not be able to see it here, but you should be able to see daylight all the way through. Right about there, you can see daylight. Yep, there it is all the way through. And so you can see that cool air comes from the front here and goes that way through the radiator. Excellent. Another thing we want to see here, if we go all the way underneath here, so if you look from this angle here, this is the bypass hose that we were talking about. Water pump is right there. And if we go underneath here, we have the lower rad hose. And that lower rad hose goes all the way up and attaches to the water pump. And then on this side, it attaches to the bottom of the radiator. One thing we didn't point out was the water jackets, and the water jackets are inside the engine, around the cylinders, and coolant flows in and around those water jackets. So first of all, let's start out with coolant at the water pump. We're going to follow it from there and see where it goes. The first cycle that we're going to talk about is the heating cycle. So let's just say you started your engine was cool, and now as the engine is running, inside each one of the cylinders is a fire. And all those fires is a V6, so there's 6 cylinders. All those fires are creating heat. We need to get rid of that heat. So the coolant goes from the water pump, through the water pump, into the water jackets, through all of the water jackets, all the way through all the engine here, and then comes back through the intake manifold right here and goes to the thermostat. Now, it can't go through the thermostat because the thermostat at the moment right here is closed because it's not hot enough. And so it goes past and goes over here, runs to this fitting and down into that orange hose down there, which is the bypass hose. Bypass hose runs here, down back to the water pump. So if we were to go through that quickly, we would see the following. The heating cycle is coolant goes from the water pump to the water jackets, through the water jackets, back through to the thermostat housing. Can't go through the thermostat housing because the thermostat is closed, so it goes back down through the bypass hose, buried under there, through the bypass hose, back into the water pump. And it cycles through that whole system until the engine has been running long enough and the coolant that runs past the water jackets is warm enough, and then it comes to the thermostat, and the thermostat is open. When the thermostat opens, coolant goes from the water pump to the water jackets, through the intake manifold to the thermostat. That is open, comes up the radiator hose, through the radiator hose, into the radiator. I'll just pull the rad cap off here. We'll look inside, and you can see all the tubes that are running down through the radiator. You can see those, they're squished tubes. And as the coolant goes down those tubes, it is also heading down the radiator. And all those tubes, you can see all those lines running up and down. They run all the way down to the very bottom. At the very bottom, we come to the lower rad hose. The lower rad hose, as the coolant is going through the radiator, I should say, it goes down to the lower rad hose and it's cooling on the way down because that fan is spinning. This one right here. The fan is spinning, sucking air through the radiator. As the air gets sucked through the radiator, it takes the heat from the coolant, from the tubes and from the coolant, and puts it back into the air. Gets down to the bottom to the lower rad hose, up the lower rad hose, back to the water pump right in front of us there, and then goes through that same cycle again. So quickly, for the cooling cycle, coolant goes from the water pump to the water jackets, through the water jackets, back through to the thermostat housing. Thermostat is open, coolant comes up the radiator hose, down into the radiator, down the tubes, goes through the tubes, and all the way down to the very bottom. Air rushes past because the fan is sucking the air through. As the coolant goes down, the coolant is getting cooler and cooler and cooler. It gets to the bottom, to the lower rad hose, goes back up to the water pump and goes through the cycle again.